Start my music. Here we go.
It's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bumping through your broadcast. Grab a chair, fill your glass. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bumping through your broadcast. Grab a chair, fill your glass.
Hey, welcome to the Really Charlie Podcast. I'm Charlie Perry, and my guest, fabulous guest, inspiring guest. She's got it all. She's got it all, and I am so glad to have her on here. And this is Kim Conrey, and I'm so happy to have her, and that's what I try to do. I always try to get someone on my podcast to create another guest. And this is what happened. Kathy Nichols ended up talking to me, being on the podcast, and recommended Kim to this podcast. So, and reading about her, it's just unbelievable things that you're doing. And I hope that you continue to do the work that you're doing. And you definitely have someone that's going to follow you for to stay forward, only because you're living and learning through your experiences and what you're going through, and what you're talking about in your blogs. So I'm definitely going to be a person that's going to listen to you quite often, only because podcasting is something I like to listen to. If I don't have to put the TV on, I'll put a podcast on, and that's good enough for me. So welcome. It's an honor to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm especially happy to be here during a Mental Health Awareness Month. So it's especially great to be here to talk about OCD and writing, and especially what OCD is and what it isn't.
Yes.
Some people think if they like to keep their bookshelf alphabetized, they're so OCD. And by the way, we hate it when people use it as an adjective.
Mm-hmm.
But and of course, OCD can have an organizational component, but not always.
Yes.
And some people with OCD can be super clean, but not always.
Mm-hmm.
Because my daughter has, as part of her OCD, also had the hand washing problem, and she would wash her hands until they bled and cracked. But get this, the sink she was washing her hands in, filthy.
Wow.
And I think that would shock most people to learn that OCD is not logical, because logically, if you were worried about those hands being surgically clean like that, you would worry about the sink being dirty too.
Yes.
But no, the obsession was focused on the hands themselves, and she was washing them till they literally bled and cracked. So there's a lot of misunderstandings about OCD. And one of the big ones, too, is a lot of people don't know that you can also have intrusive thoughts. And this is a really scary one. And I hope it's okay if I dive right in.
Yes, go ahead.
Is it? Okay, great. Thank you.
That's the main reason why you're here.
And I know when a friend of hers took their own life, my first thought, and they were so young, they were 18, my first thought was, and I don't know why they took their life, but my first thought was, what if they had Harm OCD and no one told them that this was a form of obsessive compulsive disorder? Harm OCD is where you have an intrusive thought about harming yourself or someone else. And these are not violent people. These are not people who want to hurt someone. No. It's a door gets stuck open in your brain. Okay. And you may watch a horror movie. You may see a clip on the news. God knows there's a lot of that in the news, right? And you may think, oh God, how do I know I'm not a violent person? How do I know I won't do something like that?
Hmm.
And the neurotypical brain would say, "Psh, I'm a good person. I wouldn't
Yeah.
do that. That's a silly thought," and go on about their day. But the OCD brain would say, how can I know for sure? How can I know for sure? And it would keep playing over and over and over. And not only have studies shown that people with harm OCD are no more likely than the average person to commit violence, some studies have even shown that they're less likely to commit violence, that the compassion and empathy within the sufferer actually feeds the loop where they're trying to find a space in their head to prove, I'm not a murderer. I wouldn't do that. Right, right,
Hmm.
right. So they seek assurance. And it's not, a lot of people will say, oh, just don't worry. You know, you can't add a day to your life by worrying. And while all that's good and true, and people are just trying to help by saying that, OCD doesn't respond to logic at all.
Wow.
And the OCD brain, there's actually areas in the brain, well, three for the most part, that are thicker or thinner. So the actual brain of the OCD sufferer, if you look at it on an MRI, actually looks structurally different.
Hmm.
So this isn't someone who is just a worry wart. Like, I think a lot of people like to think, oh, they're a worry wart. They like to worry. No, there's actually something different in their head. And a really wonderful example that was given in a book by Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz called Brain Lock, which helped me a lot when I was dealing with OCD when I was younger. And by the way, I will always have OCD, but it's gotten
Yes.
easier as I've aged. But the example he gives is on an MRI, he looked at a brain with Huntington's disease, which causes uncontrolled movements, and he looked at a brain with OCD. And under the MRI, they both lit up right, like they were on fire, where the problem was in their brain. But in both cases, a door is stuck open inside each brain. But with Huntington's disease, uncontrolled movements keep cycling through and cycling through and cycling through inside the Huntington's brain. Inside the OCD brain, a thought will keep cycling through and cycling through. So in both brain, a door is stuck open. Unfortunately, with the OCD sufferer, we don't see it. With the person suffering from Huntington's disease, you can see them struggling to write their name, an action that, they've written their name their whole lives, but suddenly that person may just be struggling to write their name, right? But with the OCD sufferer, because you can't see mental illness unless this person is performing their ritual, like if they have a ritual that goes with the intrusive thought, or if they're washing their hands for the 100th time, or checking a door, that was my jam for
Hmm.
the 100th time. um you can't see it, and I think that that's a lot of the problem, is we don't see the illness, so it's easy to say, oh, stop worrying. Or it's easy to cliche it and for people to say, oh, I'm so OCD, I like to organize my sock drawer. Or
Yeah.
my friend's so OCD because they can't have dust anywhere. And I don't know if they're OCD or not, but I do know that it's wildly overused and we can't see the mental illness. And there are so many times I see people, sleeping under a bridge, homeless folks, and I think, how many of those people are mentally ill, and
Hmm.
and it's untreated mental illness. We had fairly decent insurance. It's fairly decent. And Charlie, we went through 4 therapists, mental health professionals, before
Wow.
we found appropriate help for my daughter. It took
Amazing.
forever. It was so tough, even with decent insurance. So it's no surprise to me that some people just aren't getting help.
Hmm.
I think of people that are homeless, and my first thought when I see them is they're probably mentally. I mean, there's probably something untreated going on, and some people even say, "Oh, well, they're an alcoholic or what." Well, maybe. You know, I don't know the torment going on inside their head. I don't live in their skin. I don't walk in their shoes. I won't be judging them. You know, a
Hmm.
lot of people self-medicate to quiet the torment, and if
Amen.
that's all you got, then maybe you do self-medicate. And I wish they didn't have to. And they shouldn't have to, and
Hmm.
that's what I think, and my judgments is not gonna change that, but, love can, love in action, and, I see these parents that, they have children that are telling them, "I'm having these thoughts," these kids that are terrified, and adults too. I mean, adults
Hmm.
can have harm OCD, and they're scared to say anything because they don't know what it is. Who would guess that that violent looping thought, would you even know what to type into a search engine? Would you even know that that was OCD? Because some people don't have like a door checking ritual or a hand washing
Hmm.
ritual before the violent intrusive thought gets in their head on a loop. So would they know that that's OCD? And my daughter said to me, "Mom, if the things I see in my head are true, then I don't deserve to live." And she's the
Wow.
most compassionate, sweet, kind, loving girl, would never hurt anybody, but she couldn't stop this looping thought.
Hmm.
And we eventually did find a psychologist with experience in exposure and response prevention, or ERP, which is the
Yes.
gold standard for obsessive compulsive disorder. And it's really important to find an experienced therapist in ERP, exposure response prevention, which means exposing the sufferer to the compulsion, and they sit with it. They don't do the ritual. Like my daughter had a ritual of touching a lamp because when she
Hmm.
had a bad thought, she was turning off a lamp and she thought, for example, everybody's is different, none of them are logical. But if I touch the lamp, replace it with a good thought, and can hold the good thought in my head, then that means that I'm not a bad person. And she
Wow.
would get halfway across the living room, but she couldn't hold the thought in her head. So she would go back to the lamp, touch it again. But then the thought would come back. Because when you're not trying to think about something and you're trying really hard not to think of it, what are you doing?
Hmm.
You're thinking about it. The
Yeah.
very act of trying not to think of something means you're thinking about it. So you need exposure and response prevention therapy with an experienced therapist. And I'm happy to say we finally found it. She's doing great in college. She's got a summer job. She's doing so well. And God, I'm thankful for a therapist. But there's
Yes.
so many people, you know, they don't have insurance. They can't afford it. And I think, God, what do they do? What do they
How
do?
was it that, I mean, you've been going through this yourself since 13
Yes.
years old,
Yeah.
and so now you become a parent, and now you're mom, and so you're seeing things, and recognizing things, uh, and now you're looking for the care, and it's not there,
Yeah.
or parts of the care for your daughter, and that could be nerve wracking, and probably affected you while she was going through something. You were going through something at yourself,
Yeah.
and so and they was one thing I heard about is thinking. Thinking's like an invisible part of it, and people never think they want to see some physical things about it, and thinking is not physical, and so we kind of, some people that are not familiar with OCD may never put the thinking process, when they're trying to analyze and think of different things. They just not avoid it, just don't understand that that's part of it.
Yeah.
And but wow, I got to commend you, and I'm glad your daughter's doing well. And that's what it's about, having people surrounded by you, with you, and getting you to help. You talked about the homeless people, and they self-medicate. Sometimes those self-medication solutions are the only thing that they have available and the only thing that could actually help them. And it may be the only thing that they actually know that's helping them. They may not know of any other things that are helping, that could help them, but that the self-medication is part of it.
Yeah.
So, and as far as your husband and everything, have you guys taught a lot? As he's been learning on the way and been supportive. Not surprised the family thinks, but it's sometimes people get scared and intimidated. So
Yeah, it's tough. It's really scary, and it was tough for my ex at the time when we were together, and talking about the options and medication maybe, and there's no shame in that either, but it was scary because he's a veteran, and coming back from Afghanistan, and there were people with PTSD and people who had gone on medication, and the suicide rate was pretty high, and so there was some fear there, like
yes,
medication versus no medication, and what do you do? It was scary, and so it does affect the whole family. And then I was remarried not so long ago, and it's tough because it does affect the whole household. And I remember when my daughter was going through the therapy, it was just at the height of COVID, and so she was doing her appointments telehealth. And when she was in the middle of the exposure and response prevention therapy, we would hear her up there just wailing, just because she would be they take the sufferer to the height of their exposure of what bothers them, and they may even have them talk through the terrifying thought, the violent thought or whatever. Because there are some people, for example, who have their spouse take all the knives out of the kitchen. They won't slice their own sandwich because they have this fear of just literally holding a knife.
Wow.
Because they've had this looping thought, well, what if I just pick it up and just stab somebody? Well, how do I know that I won't? And then it just loops. But yeah, so the therapist would walk her through these scenarios. What is it you think you're going to do? Well, talk about it. And no, don't ritualize. Don't say your prayer. Don't do your tapping thing, because people have different little things that they do that sort of satisfies their brain. Well, if I do this a certain way, like with holding the lamp or whatever. And she would just be up there. We would hear her upstairs just wailing. It sounded like a banshee, just crying, because your brain has to learn to sit with it and not do the ritual, because every time you do the ritual, you're telling your brain, well, you need assurance. I have to assure you with this ritual. And if you keep giving your brain the assurance, you're telling the brain there's something to assure about. But if you can have the thought and do nothing about it, then the brain will eventually go, and stop it. But every time you do the ritual, it's like you're digging a groove in your brain deeper and deeper. And the brain, it's an abyss. The brain keeps asking for more ritual until people can have rituals that go on for hours. I mean, it doesn't shock me that someone would not be able to hold down a job. There was this one lady that I read about. It took her 2 hours to get out of bed.
Wow.
Because she believed that before her feet touched the floor, if she didn't do these certain things, she or a family member would die,
Wow.
So yeah, we would hear, anyways, my daughter up there, just crying because she would be going through the therapy and having to not ritualize and not say certain prayers or not do certain things. But she eventually trained her brain. When you stop ritualizing, you train your brain to not see the thought as something dangerous. You let the thought happen. You let the violent thought, okay, it's there, and I'm not going to react to it. And she didn't understand that for the longest time until she eventually read this thing about OCD that said, the intrusive thought is like an itch. It may itch terribly and you want to scratch it. But if you don't scratch it, it will eventually stop itching. And
Wow.
that may sound simple, but for her, that's how she finally understood not ritualizing, and just sitting with the thought.
Amazing.
So, yeah, it worked for her.
Yeah, it's guys deserve 5 stars, including her. I have a comment from YouTube. Michael Samayo says it is estimated that 20 to 25% of homeless people compared with 6% of the non-homeless have severe mental health illness. Sorry. Other estimates, others estimate that up to 1/3 of the homeless suffer from mental illness. It's so true.
Yeah.
And Michael's been a guest on my it's a bi-weekly podcast that we have, and it's making mental health your priority, or a priority. And and we talk about it as my friend's life coach. He's a co-host, Marvin Speller, in Los Angeles, and every day he's dealing with the homeless, by choice, and he goes down there, and him and his wife, which happens to be my cousin, and they try to do all they can. And one of the priorities is mental illness, and if he can try to help, he's going to do it, and he puts everything else aside. And so
that's beautiful. That's
yeah,
beautiful, man. It could be any of us.
Yes. Maybe one time you could he might be a super guest for your podcast.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I know he'll review this later on,
Yeah.
And I hope you guys get connected.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about your book. Stealing Ours, is that correct title?
Stealing Aries. Yes,
Aries,
that's my
right.
book that I wrote when I needed a break from writing about trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Stealing Aries is a sci-fi romance. Yeah.
Okay. Let me try to bring it up here. Only because it's a cool book cover. I love it. I love the cover.
Thank you. Shout out to David King at Black Rose Writing for that cover. I think he did a great job. I'm really proud
Sure
of it.
did. All right, let's see. I'm gonna stop this. StreamYard's awesome,
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, it's all right,
there it is. Yeah.
Yes. I love it. It's so I can't wait. You talked about it being on pre-order, and I'm gonna definitely make it one of my books that I have on the shelf, along with Kathy's book. It just, you guys give me plenty of reading, and I'm still way behind on some other books that I have. So, but I definitely like to flip flop and go to different books. And it's all depends on my mood. I may need to get into something that's educational.
Right.
Then I'll read it, and then I might want to read something else, to go with my poetry. So I'll pick up some other books. But I love writing books. I really do. And I have some stories on the shelf, and hopefully I get them out there. But I'm really into the podcasting, and I'm on the radio. So it's something that I like doing. It occupies a lot of my time. So
yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Our Wild Women Who Write podcast we really enjoy it. And you get to meet so many cool people when you podcast, And your poetry, by the way, it's really good.
Thank you.
I was
really
flipping through
appreciate
the other day and reading. It's really good.
it. Means a lot to me. I appreciate it. All right, let's see here. I'm gonna make sure that I got all the comments here. All right, let's move this. There we go. The so on your podcast, um, is that weekly? That's one thing I didn't.
We do about 2 interviews a month.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's more. I think it's just really because there's more of us. There's usually 4. Well, we have one member that pops in and out, but 3 or 4 of us that do the interviews, and so all our schedules have to coordinate,
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. So we do about 2 per month.
Yeah. I mean, it has to be right because you. I mean, it's hard enough just getting a guest, on a podcast, just one guest. So now when you have a multitude of co-hosts or hosts, um, it gets difficult. We all work for a living. We're all trying to do the best we can. Um, and I wish we were all, the small people like you and I. I wish we had a Joe Rogan schedule, where we could do it every day. All he
Right.
does is walk out and he's in his house and he's in the studio, and there's but that we all got our path, and
Yeah.
my path is to do what I'm doing right now, and
And you do
but
it well.
thank you. This is it's amazing, this is what the pandemic has given me, is doing the podcast. It's I would say with the pandemic, it's good, bad, and ugly, and the ugly part about it is the many people that we lost. But
Yeah.
when I was at home and, and not working, this was something that I could go to. And when I started doing it, I started getting better and better. Um, and I'm learning and learning every single day. So I got to say, I'm glad I'm doing it. And the
Yeah.
name really Charlie comes from my wife. Every time I do something, she says, "Really, Charlie?"
Really,
So
Charlie.
yeah.
Kathy was
So,
telling me that. I thought that was just the cutest thing. Really,
yeah.
Charlie.
Mhm.
I
So
love it.
she says that I have to give her some money, some royalties for this,
Yeah, you do.
yeah.
Well, the OCD memoir was, you were talking about pandemic projects and stuff. That was my pandemic project, and it's under consideration with a couple of publishers now. Now, Stealing Aries, that's going to be out in September 29th. So on pre-order now.
Hmm.
Go to aries-ascending.com and you can pre-order it. There's a link there. But no, the OCD memoir was my pandemic project, and I was talking to my husband George about the OCD, and he's like, well, you should write about that. He's like, a lot of people don't really understand OCD itself,
Hmm.
much less harm OCD. I'm like, oh gosh, no, they don't. I said, so maybe it could be this YA book, or what do you think? Maybe sort of like the Michael Vase series. He's like, no, 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 Kim, no. Because I was thinking fiction.
Hmm.
And he's like, no, tell your story and Sloane's story. And I was like, oh, don't
Yes.
nobody want to hear that.
And
Because,
I,
when we're telling our own stories, we see our lives as ordinary.
mhm.
They're our lives, we live them, right? We think they're interesting, right? Because we're
Yeah.
the star of our own, show. But
Hmm.
I was like, George, don't nobody want to hear that. He's like, oh, Kim, but they do. He's like,
Yes.
people don't know what this is. And he said, I really think people would be invested, you know, wanting to know how to help their child. And even if their child doesn't have OCD, you know, people with any mental illness
Hmm.
would like to hear about the search to find your child a therapist that can help them? Like, how do you even go about that? How do you look for them? Like, how do you know if the person that they're talking to is a good fit? Like, how do you feel as a parent? Do you feel like this is somehow your fault? And I did go through that, like parents sometimes blame themselves. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I did. I mean, I went through that. And so, yeah, it became memoir, but that was my pandemic project. So, what made you start podcasting?
I was going to try on a local, I was actually going to just do a show on a local cable access studio, station. And so we started, and that was before the pandemic. And it was pretty good. It was definitely something, that I wanted to do. And the local station was New Bedford the Guide. And I loved going there. I loved being in the studio, behind the camera, and it was great. And then pandemic hit, and so now we couldn't meet, we couldn't be in studio. So I said, well, I got to try to do something. And then it clicked about podcasting, and I was watching a couple of my friends, and I said, yeah, I should try that. And as you start in the beginning, technical issues are definitely a problem, and I was like getting frustrated, but I was like, no, I like this, I gotta stick with it. And here I am. Here I am.
Here you are. And you said you've done over 200 of these now?
Yes.
Oh
And
my gosh.
some I wanted, I slowed up a little bit, and then I think it was 2 weeks. 2 weeks I didn't do something, and I was like, oh my God. I said, I got to set it up for the next month. But the thing that draws me to this podcast is that every guest becomes my friend. And so now it's like, wow, and I'm communicating all the time on Facebook. And some have gone on to start their podcast. And it's like, this is nice. This is what I like. It's still, I like community. So this is kind of this is that community thing. And it really, really drives me. I was a police officer for 30 years, and I loved community, and I loved it, like interacting with people, doing something, problem solving, listening and learning. And the podcast is, I'm learning every single day. At some part of the day, I listen to the Joe Rogan Experience, and I always find there's always someone that he puts on the show that I didn't know. And I don't think I know everybody, but I'm saying, who is this guy? And so I look him up and Google the person, the guest that he has, and I'm like, oh my God. I says, I know who that is. And so I heard their story, their backstory of whether it's being a comedian or an actor, whatever it is. And they became more interesting to me. And
yes. I've done that before too. Like, let me see. I need to know more. Yeah.
So, and it's very, very, and even like music, that podcast has me listen to other music. It's a group, the Black Keys, this other group, Whiskey Myers. You gotta listen to them on YouTube, or Whiskey Myers. I was like, I would never think that I would listen, and I've been listening to them for the past 3 days.
You're giving me suggestions. I'm writing this down.
All right, Whiskey Myers, like Jack Daniel's whiskey. Actually, I can't find it. Where is it? There it is.
Well, you would be a good person. Oh, yeah.
It's my nice light. It's a light.
That's cool. Oh, it does. It has a cord coming out the back.
Yeah. So, but
yeah. Well, no, you would be a good podcast for the Wild Women Who Write, because Especially, and I don't know if Kathy mentioned this or realized this, but because she writes thrillers, mysteries, and things like that, and to interview police officer and
I
find
would.
out what's authentic
Hmm.
and what is cliched, what's
Yes.
stereotyped, what makes police officers cringe when they read it in a book. I bet you've
Hmm.
had the experience of a
Yes.
writer writing a police officer, and it is so stereotyped that you're like, no,
Yeah,
we
it is.
don't act like that. We don't
Yeah.
say that.
Hmm.
We can
I,
have you on the
I,
podcast to tell us how to do it right.
I would love that. I later there was a series called The Wire. I'm pretty sure you're aware of it. So The Wire was that was a great series. And a friend of mine on the job before I retired had said, "Hey, you never seen The Wire?" I said, "No, I never." He said, "This is the most realistic show that I've ever seen on TV about police life," and it was so accurate that I was like, "Oh my god!" And I started binge you know, watching over. I mean, almost 4 hours of watching it. I just couldn't stop watching it, and it was very fascinating. So that is one. There was one book or movie that I definitely didn't second guess or say, "That's what are you doing? That's not even. We don't do that." It's just something that that was so real to me, and I actually, and then they got nominated for an award,
Oh,
and they didn't get it. They just got nominated, and
you're
I
like,
said,
I got robbed. No.
"Yeah, they did."
So
So
that's one that we writers could watch if
mhm.
we wanted to see something that was fairly accurate,
Yes,
that would show us a good example of procedure and
hmm,
maybe authenticity to
yes,
some at least some extent. Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
So the
That's good to know.
probably, yeah, I would love to. That would be an honor to do that. And sometimes police officers can't get out of that official capacity. Sometimes, even when they're retired, and it's like, just tell your story, just tell it like it is. And like one of my bosses, he said, "Hey, this is what I want to do when we retire, because we have to do it when we retire." He says, "Look, I want you to write a story about me, and then we had a third friend, and then you. We're all going to write different stories." He said, "As far as me," he says, "I just got to tell it all, but I got to tell it all when I'm retired, because there's no way. I'll probably be fired. I have people yelling at me." He said, "It's just a real life story," and he's such a party animal, and he's living a good life now, and great family. But he said, if we write this story, it's going to be a bestseller." I said, "Of course it will. I know it will." But we never got to it, and I don't think we will. I don't think we will. But not that we did bad things and crazy illegal things, but it would just be conduct unbecoming of a police officer.
We would get the inside scoop though, and it would be great.
Yeah, it sure would. And I, uh, you taught me a lot today. Well, you taught me a lot just saying that you were going to be my guest. And when I started reading a lot of things that you were involved in, it gave me a classroom assignment, and I'm very very happy that for one, first is Kathy bringing us together. She was able to, we made that happen. But I definitely learned something, and I'm glad, because I am driving a van, a school bus, and like I said, I'm around a lot of people, and plus I have my own podcast I'm doing bi-weekly. that it's very, very important that I try to spread the word about everything that I possibly can. And Harm OCD is something I'm going to bring up in the next podcast.
Thank you.
That I have. I definitely will. And I'll definitely, anything I take from you, I'll ask for permission.
Oh yeah, sure. And the blog, if you want to share that, it's Harm OCD, KimConrey.com. There's blog posts that you can read and share, resources, and I have different websites you can go to read more about Harm OCD, and my stories are there, but also with the resources, there's clinical resources as well, for sure. And OCD International, they have a database there where you can put in your zip code if you're looking for, a therapist in your area. And they just have so many good resources. They're great.
I'm going to make sure that's going to be a segment on the next podcast. I'm going to make sure that we do that. And it's nice that you have the resources, because I can put that in the comment section and definitely that way, because, everyone's kind of that they don't want to, they got a stigma about everything, and they just don't want to come forward and or don't know how, maybe. And so, but if they're listening and I put it in front of them, it may be something that triggers them to do something, or.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. And I often get scared that, like, especially with Harm OCD, and then when you think about school shootings and stuff, could a teenager, because I was once having dinner with some folks, and I mentioned Harm OCD, and there were two former high school counselors at the table, great people, and I'm sure awesome counselors, but they didn't know what Harm OCD was. And I thought, well, what if a teenager, and it through no fault of their own. I mean, these were educated, awesome people that I'm sure were great at their job, but they had never heard of Harm OCD. So what if a student went to them in this day and age of school shootings, oh my gosh, and said, I'm having this terrifying, repetitive thought that keeps going through my mind. What would they do? And could we blame them if they got on the phone and said, hey, I got this student here that says they're thinking about, and they didn't know what Harm OCD was, and maybe they even call the police on this teenager, and it would traumatize that child even further. They're already traumatized because they have Harm OCD, if they do. I don't know what they have, because I'm not a clinician, but it traumatizes them even further. So I feel like the more people I can tell about Harm OCD so that they know what this even is, the more understanding we could get out there. And then maybe the counselor could stop and say, well, I may not for sure know what this is, but before I freak out, let's call in the proper clinician, because it's usually a psychologist that does the diagnostics for something to determine if you do or don't. And maybe they don't have it. Maybe there really is danger. But you would hate for somebody to be on a hair trigger about it, because we are scared these days of things like that, when it might just be an intrusive thought and the child's no danger at all. They just have OCD and they just need therapy. And so, the more we can spread the word and people can know what this is, that it is a diagnosable, treatable, neurological disorder, and you can walk free of it. You don't have to end your life. You don't have to think your life is over. It can be treated. So, man, I'm so grateful that you provided this space that we can spread the word.
I'm so glad you mentioned all that. That was perfect. It definitely it needs to be put out there. And once we're done with the podcast, I'll definitely download everything, the video version and the audio version, on Anchor and Spotify.
Awesome.
I'll have that done within the hour. I have to run out and then come back. So, but I want to make sure that it's up there, and then I'll share it on my Facebook page, and that way you'll have it. And
Thank you.
hopefully between our 10 million friends we both have, we'll be all right, and everyone can share it all over the place.
Yes, far and wide. Yes, please.
But please, I would love you to come on again, especially when your book comes out.
Yeah.
And anything else that you're doing, please. I'm definitely gonna add some comments to different things that you're doing, whether it's the podcast or I definitely want to give a big review on your podcast, because I think you guys, girls, are definitely putting something out there that needs to be heard. And it caught my fascination. I mean, I wish if I could tell you how much I was listening, it just, as soon as I get to work, I'm putting it on, and I'm just listening, and people calling me, Charlie. I'm not even hearing them because I have my earbuds on and I'm listening to you guys.
Busy.
So, yeah. So I'll talk to you later. I just, and I could put it on pause. I just don't want to because I'm into it. So keep up the good work.
Yours too, my friend. Yours too. It's great.
All right. Anything you want to close with?
No, that's it. I just, and hey, if you need a break from the trauma, Stealing Aries is there for you.
Yes.
Set 500 years in the future after we've colonized Mars.
Nice. Very nice. Oh, I'm sorry, Kim. One thing I didn't ask you. Who would you like to see on the Really Charlie podcast? Who?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, there's so many.
And if you can't think of it, just let me know.
Well, yeah, Gabby Anderson, our fellow wild woman, she has, her book is coming out in January. It's called South of Happily. It's about a first generation Hungarian immigrant or daughter of immigrants. And it's really good. It's about dealing with families and quirky, but also serious. It's really good. And my good friend, Christian Bradley West, he has a wonderful Instagram account called The Country Clairvoyant, and he's got bazillion followers because he's just hilarious. Oh my goodness. It's spirituality with a fun, quirky little twist, but he would be a good one too. And my husband, George Weinstein, he's got 6 books out now.
Oh, very
and
nice.
He is also goodness, forgetting his title here. He's the president of the Writers Club now, but he's executive officer. Yes.
Okay.
Anyway, Atlanta Writers Club. Yeah. But anyway, he's author forever. But
very
he
nice.
has like 6 books out, and he would be a good one too. So, I'm full of suggestions.
All right.
You'll never run out of guests.
I appreciate it. I have, so I will reach out to all 3 of them.
Yeah. I'll send you their email.
And definitely do that. I'm wide open for the summer, and I don't object to doing things on the weekend, when people are free. So I could do that. It doesn't always have to be on Wednesday night. I'm available any night except Tuesday when I'm on the radio. So, but I try to make it as convenient as possible. Kim, 5 stars to you and all that you're doing.
And yourself.
I appreciate it. You need me for anything, please send me a message, whatever, and get in touch with me. All right?
Yeah, same here, my friend.
All right. Fascinating guest. I'm loving it. All right. Kim, I will do everything that I can to tag different things that you're doing to my friends, and definitely where it applies to life coaches and parents. I like the stories. One of those my favorite podcasts was parents that had autistic children, and they were collaborating and doing things. And so in your case with the Harm OCD, if you ever do anything with parents talking and speaking, you just let me know. Or if you already did it, I'd like to get a hold of that, and definitely
That would be a good one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I know OCD International has a group of parents. So
Okay.
I have to look into that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you more, and take care.
You too.
God
Man.
bless. All right. He's a great guest, awesome guest. I am so pleased, and this is definitely a podcast that I will put on tomorrow morning, and I will listen to it over and over again. Probably I'll listen to it tonight and tomorrow, just so I can definitely, re-listen and listen again to what Kim had offered and said, because I'm trying to really get a grasp of Harm OCD, because I know that there's people in my life that definitely may be going through this, and I want to be there as best I can. So, all right. Well, my fabulous intro and song by Lionel Peter Walker will close this podcast, and you can find this podcast on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, and maybe Buzzsprout. I'm thinking about that, but right now it's definitely on all the platforms, Apple and everything. So, all right, take care, y'all, and have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.
It's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bumping through your broadcast. Grab a chair, fill your glass. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bumping through your broadcast. Grab a chair, fill your glass.